Hey everyone! Welcome back to the channel. Now, it's time for some controversial opinions. Now, these are my top 5 picks for Marvel's biggest mistakes. It took me a while to narrow it down, but these are my personal choices for what Marvel has done wrong in the past. And let's just say that there will be no shortage of comments disagreeing with this list. But before we get started, make sure you guys have liked and subscribed so you don't miss out on any future videos. Also, I will be doing something similar for DC next week. So if you're a DC fan, make sure to stay tuned so you don't miss out on that one. And without further ado, let's get right into it. Starting off at number 5 is the death of Jean Grey. This was probably one of the most controversial things that Marvel has ever done. And I can see both sides of the argument. On one hand, Jean Grey had been a prominent member of the X-Men since the original team back in the 60s, and she had always been romantically involved with Cyclops. When Marvel decided to kill her off and replace her with a new character who had all of Jean's powers, but looked nothing like her, many fans were upset about this decision. However, I can also understand why Marvel did this. At the time, they were trying to appeal to a younger audience, and a new look with a new character may have seemed like a better option than keeping the older, more dated look of Jean Grey. Ultimately, though, this move backfired as fans were not happy with the replacement character, and they eventually brought Jean back a few years later. Next up is the introduction of the Ultimate Universe. The Ultimate Universe was an attempt to update the Marvel Universe for a new generation of readers by making the characters more relatable and their stories more accessible. However, it didn't take long for the Ultimate Universe to become more popular than the main continuity, and for the characters to start being used in other media. One of the most controversial things about the Ultimate Universe was the decision to make Spider-Man's Uncle Ben a drug dealer. This change was made to make Peter Parker's origin story more realistic and relatable to a new generation of readers. However, many fans were upset with this change as they felt that it cheapened the legacy of the character. Another thing that many fans disliked about the Ultimate Universe was the decision to make the Fantastic Four a group of young mutants instead of a family of explorers. This change was made to make the Fantastic Four more appealing to a younger audience. But it ended up alienating a lot of the character's longtime fans. Overall, the Ultimate Universe was a well-intentioned but ultimately misguided attempt to update the Marvel Universe. While some elements of the universe were successful, others were not. And one of the biggest failures was the decision to introduce the ultimate version of Galactus as a human serial killer named Nick Fury. This was a drastic departure from the original version of the character, and it didn't sit well with a lot of fans. Coming in at no. 3 is the introduction of the Inhumans. Inhumans are a race of soup beings that were created when humans were exposed to the Terrigen mists. The problem with Inhumans is that they're just not very interesting. They basically just a knockoff version of mutants with none of the interesting history or social commentary that comes with it. The Inhuman concept was introduced in the 1990s, and it was clear that Marvel was trying to capitalize on the success of X-Men by creating a new race of superpowered beings. The problem is that they just didn't have the same appeal. When Marvel tried to relaunch the Inhumans in 2030 with a new series of comics, it was clear that the concept still wasn't good. The comics were canceled after only a few months. The Inhumans may have been Marvel's attempt to capitalize on the success of X, but they just didn't have the same appeal. And they ended up being a big mistake for the company. The second spot on this list goes to Marvel. Flirtation with the horror genre in the 1970s and 80s. During this time, Marvel published a number of horror-themed comics, including ones featuring characters like Werewolf by Night and Man-Thing. However, these comics were not successful and they were eventually discontinued. There are a couple of reasons for this. First of all, the horror genre was not as popular in the 1970s and 80s as it is today. As such, there was not a large audience for these types of comics. Additionally, Marvel's horror comics were often criticized for being too violent and disturbing, which also contributed to their lack of popularity. Finally, it should be noted that Marvel was not alone in their failed attempt to break into the horror genre. Other publishers like DC also tried and failed to make horror comics popular during this time period. Therefore, It seems that Marvel's foray into the horror genre was less of a mistake and more of a failed experiment that was doomed to fail from the start. Finally, coming in at no. 1 is the death of Gwen Stacy. Now, hear me out on this one, because I know how beloved of a character Gwen Stacy is and how iconic her death was. It is for this reason that I believe this was Marvel's biggest mistake. Now, back in the 1970s, Marvel Comics was looking for ways to shake up its line of superhero books, and one of the ways they decided to do this was to kill off some of the love interests of their flagship heroes. In the case of his love interest was Gwen Stacy, and in order to make Peter Parker's life more miserable, they decided to kill her off in a particularly brutal way. Not only was Gwen killed, but she was also killed in front of Spider-Man, which left him feeling even more guilty and responsible for her death. Now, this was a huge mistake on Marvel's part for several reasons. First of all, Gwen Stacy was a well-loved character, and her death was met with a huge amount of fan backlash. Additionally, the way that she died was incredibly graphic for the time period, and it left a lasting impact on readers. Finally, killing off a major female character like Gwen sent a message that Marvel was not interested in appealing to female readers. This was a huge mistake, as women make up a significant portion of the comic book buying audience. Ultimately, the death of Gwen Stacy was a huge mistake on Marvel's part that they have been trying to recover from ever since. And that's all for this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that thumbs up button and subscribe so you don't miss out on any future videos. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Follow Unlimited League Zone. Like, share, and subscribe for more superhero battles.